Elena Vance had everything money could buy. A corner office in a gleaming tower, a penthouse overlooking the city, and a fortune that most people could only dream of. But when she turned on her television that rainy evening, expecting nothing more than background noise to fill her empty apartment, she saw something that shattered her carefully constructed world in an instant. There on the screen was Marcus Thorne, the man whose heart she'd broken 6 years ago, holding a beautiful little boy with eyes exactly like her own. The wine glass slipped from Elena's trembling fingers as the reporter's words echoed through her mind. His son Leo has been his biggest helper on the project. This was the child she'd been forced to abandon, the son she'd signed away to protect the man she loved from her father's vicious threats. Now, watching them laugh together like a perfect family, Elena realized that her sacrifice might have been the biggest mistake of her life. But what she didn't know was that her father had just discovered her secret visits to Marcus's shop, and he was already planning to destroy everything she held dear. Unless she agreed to marry a man she despised and disappear from her son's life forever. If you're watching this story unfold, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because Elena's about to make a choice that will either reunite her family or destroy them all. The rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Elena Vance's corner office like an impatient visitor. She sat behind her mahogany desk, staring at the quarterly profit reports that should have made her smile. Vance Luxury Watches had just posted record earnings. Again, but the numbers felt hollow. Everything felt hollow. Elena pushed back from her desk and walked to the window. 32 floors below, people hurried through the downtown streets with umbrellas and purpose. They had places to go, people waiting for them at home. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass and wondered when her life had become so empty. "Miss Vance?" Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your car is ready downstairs." "Thank you, Jennifer." Elena's voice sounded flat even to her own ears. The elevator ride to the parking garage was silent except for the soft jazz that played on repeat. Elena slipped into her pristine white sedan, the leather seats cold against her back. The drive to her penthouse took 20 minutes through traffic that crawled like molasses. Her apartment greeted her with the same silence that followed her everywhere. The chef had left dinner in the warmer, some kind of fish with vegetables she couldn't pronounce. Elena ate alone at her dining table, the empty chairs around her like accusations. She turned on the television just to fill the quiet. Local news. A reporter with perfect teeth was talking about community heroes, something about vintage cars and charity. Elena barely listened until the camera panned to show a man sliding out from under a classic Mustang. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, his dark skin glistening with honest sweat. He wiped his hands on a rag and smiled at the camera with the kind of warmth Elena hadn't felt in years. But that wasn't what made her freeze. It was the little boy who ran into the shot and wrapped his arms around the man's legs. The boy was maybe 6 years old, with caramel skin and bright, curious eyes. Eyes that Elena recognized because she saw them in the mirror every morning. The wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the marble floor, red wine spreading like blood. "Marcus Thorne runs Thorne Auto Restoration in the South Side," the reporter was saying. "Today he's donating this fully restored 1965 Mustang to the Children's Hospital charity auction. His son Leo has been his biggest helper on the project." Leo. The name she'd whispered into the darkness for 6 years. The name she'd been forbidden to keep. Elena stood on shaking legs, her hands pressed against her mouth as memories crashed over her like a wave. She'd been 26 and terrified, clutching the adoption papers while her father's cold voice echoed in her ears. "This mistake ends here, Elena. That boy will have a better life without you." Now, watching Marcus lift Leo onto his shoulders while the boy giggled, Elena realized her father might have been right. They looked happy, complete. They looked like a family that had never needed her at all. But seeing Leo, her Leo, alive and laughing and loved, broke something open inside her chest that had been locked away for 6 years. 20 minutes later, Elena was in her car again, still wearing her business suit but with her hair falling loose around her shoulders. She drove through the city as the rain continued to fall, leaving the gleaming towers of downtown behind. The South Side was a different world. Brick row houses lined narrow streets, and corner stores displayed hand-painted signs in their windows. Children played on stoops despite the rain, their laughter carrying through her closed windows. She found Thorn Auto easily enough. The building was smaller than she'd expected, with big bay doors and a simple sign that read, Thorn Auto Restoration, in faded blue letters. The lights were on inside, casting a warm glow into the dark street. Elena parked across the street and turned off her engine. Through the rain-streaked windshield, she could see movement inside the shop. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she waited. Then the side door opened, and Marcus stepped out with Leo beside him. Marcus was saying something that made Leo laugh, the sound carrying across the empty street like music. They shared a container of ice cream, taking turns with the spoon, and Elena could see Leo chattering excitedly about something, while Marcus listened with the patient attention of a devoted father. They were perfect together, natural, everything she'd given up the right to be part of. Elena gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles went white. Tears she'd held back for 6 years finally came, silent and hot against her cheeks. She'd told herself she'd done the right thing, that Leo would be better off without a mother who'd been too weak to fight for him. But seeing them together, seeing the life they'd built without her, hurt worse than all the years of wondering and regret. She started the car and drove away before Marcus could see her. But she made herself a promise as she turned the corner. Tomorrow, she would come back when they were open. She would find a way to be part of her son's life, even if it was just from the edges. The next morning arrived gray and wet. Elena sat in her office, staring at the same report she'd ignored the day before. But her mind was miles away in a small auto shop on the south side. Her father's voice boomed through her office before she saw him. Victor Vance had never learned to knock, even on his daughter's door. Elena. He swept into her office like a storm, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the weather. We need to discuss the merger. Elena looked up from her papers, trying to focus. Which merger? Don't play games with me. Victor settled into the chair across from her desk, his pale eyes sharp with disapproval. Hartley Industries, Julian's company. It's time to finalize the details. Julian Hartley. Elena's stomach clenched at the mention of his name. He was everything her father wanted in the son-in-law, wealthy, connected, and completely under Victor's influence. The fact that Elena found him insufferable seemed irrelevant to everyone but her. I haven't agreed to any merger, Elena said carefully. You haven't disagreed either. Victor's voice carried the edge it had held since Elena was a child, the tone that meant arguing was pointless. This company needs strategic alliances, Elena. And you need to start thinking about your future, about legacy. Legacy. The word tasted bitter in Elena's mouth. What legacy was she building? A company that crushed small businesses? A life that fit perfectly into her father's narrow vision? I need more time to review the proposal, she said. Victor's eyes narrowed. You've had months. This indecision isn't like you, Elena. You're becoming soft. The word hung between them like an accusation. Elena had heard it before, usually when she'd shown too much mercy to a struggling client or questioned one of her father's harsher business decisions. A knock on the door interrupted them. Julian stepped inside without waiting for permission, carrying a bouquet of expensive roses that looked cold and perfect. Like everything else in Elena's life. Good morning, beautiful. Julian's smile was practiced, the kind that had charmed investors and board members for years. I thought these might brighten your day. Elena accepted the flowers because refusing them would cause a scene. Thank you, they're lovely. Julian's eyes swept over her face with the calculating look of a man who was used to getting what he wanted. You look tired. Perhaps you should take the afternoon off. We could have lunch, discuss our plans. Our plans. As if she'd already agreed to marry him, as if her life was already decided. Elena felt something crack inside her chest, like ice breaking under pressure. Actually, I think I will take the afternoon off, but I have other plans. Victor's eyebrows rose. What plans? Personal ones. Elena stood, her voice steadier than it had been in months. I'm sure you gentlemen can discuss the merger without me for a few hours. She walked out of her office before either man could respond, leaving them staring after her in shock. In 32 years of life, Elena had never walked away from her father without permission. But as she rode the elevator down to the parking garage, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the dizzy rush of making her own choice. An hour later, Elena sat in her car outside Thorn Auto, wearing jeans and a simple blouse instead of her usual armor of expensive suits. Her hands trembled slightly as she stared at the open bay doors, where she could hear the sound of tools and music drifting out into the afternoon air. She changed clothes in her car like a teenager sneaking out of the house, and the absurdity of it almost made her laugh. Elena Vance, CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, changing outfits in a parking lot because she was too scared to go home and face her father's questions. But she wasn't Elena Vance, CEO, right now. She was just Elena, a mother who wanted to see her son. The walk from her car to the shop felt like miles. The smell of motor oil and coffee hit her as soon as she stepped inside, along with the sound of classic rock playing from somewhere in the back. The space was cluttered but organized, with tools hanging on pegboard walls and parts sorted into careful piles. An older black man with kind eyes and graying hair looked up from behind the counter. "Afternoon, miss. Something I can help you with?" Elena's voice caught. "I was hoping to speak with Marcus Thorn." "That'd be my nephew. He's under the Camaro there." The man pointed toward one of the lifts, where Elena could see a pair of legs sticking out from under a blue car. "Marcus, you got a customer." The legs shifted, and then Marcus Thorn slid out from under the car on a creeper, wiping his hands on a rag. When he stood up and saw Elena, he froze completely. For a moment, neither of them moved. Elena took in the changes 6 years had brought. He was broader now, more confident, with laugh lines around his dark eyes that spoke of happiness she'd never been part of. He was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache with loss and longing. Elena. Her name sounded strange in his voice, like a word he'd forgotten how to say. "Hello, Marcus." From somewhere in the back of the shop, Elena heard the sound of a child's laughter, bright and innocent. Her heart clenched so tight, she could barely breathe. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Pops, can you watch the front for a minute?" Without waiting for an answer, he jerked his head toward a small office in the back. "We need to talk." Elena followed him through the cluttered shop, her eyes searching for another glimpse of Leo. The office was tiny, cramped with filing cabinets and automotive catalogs, barely big enough for 2 people. Marcus closed the door and turned to face her, his expression hard. "What do you want?" The question hit her like a slap. What did she want? To explain? To apologize? To somehow undo 6 years of absence and pain? "I saw you on the news," she said quietly. "I saw Leo." Something flickered across Marcus's face, pain maybe, or anger. "So? So he's my son too?" "No." Marcus's voice was flat, final. "You signed the papers. You gave up that right." Elena felt tears threatening and fought them back. She'd known this would be hard, but facing Marcus's anger was worse than she'd imagined. "I was young and scared." "You were 26, Marcus cut her off. "Old enough to know what you were doing. Old enough to choose your daddy's money over your own child." The accusation hung between them like a wall. Elena opened her mouth to defend herself, to explain about Victor's threats and her fear, but footsteps in the hallway cut her off. A knock on the door made them both freeze.
"Daddy?"
Leo's voice was bright with curiosity.
"Who's the lady?"
Marcus looked at Elena, then at the door, his jaw working. When he opened it, Elena got her first clear look at her son in 6 years. Leo was beautiful. Tall for his age, with Marcus's strong build and her light brown eyes. His smile was open and curious, the smile of a child who'd been loved and protected his whole life. "She's a customer, Leo," Marcus said carefully. "Her car needs work." Leo nodded seriously, then looked directly at Elena.
"What kind of car do you have?"
Elena's throat felt tight. A white sedan." That's not very exciting. Leo's nose wrinkled.
Daddy, you should help her get something more fun, like a Mustang.
Despite everything, Elena almost smiled. Maybe someday. Come on, Leo. Marcus put a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. Let's get back to work and let the lady talk business. Leo waved at Elena as Marcus guided him away. Bye, lady. When they were gone, Marcus closed the door again and turned back to Elena, his expression carved from stone. I told him his mother died, he said quietly, because a dead mother is better than one who left him because he's black. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She sank into the single chair in the tiny office, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. That's not, she whispered. That's not why I left. Isn't it? Marcus leaned against the door, his arms crossed. Your father made it real clear what he thought about me, about us, about our son. Elena wanted to explain, to tell him about Victor's threats and the impossible choice she'd faced. But how could she make him understand without sounding like she was making excuses? I was scared, she said finally. I was 26, but I felt like a child. My father said he'd destroy you if I didn't sign those papers. He said Leo would be better off with a father who could love him without shame. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. And now, what changed? Elena looked up at him, this man she'd loved and lost and never forgotten. I saw him laugh. I saw how happy he is with you. And I realized I've been dead inside for 6 years, wondering what kind of man he was becoming, what kind of father you were. I wanted to see him, even if it's only as a customer. Marcus shook his head slowly. Elena, you can't just walk back in. I know. Elena stood up, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. I know I don't have any rights. I know I gave them up, but maybe I could just be around sometimes. My car really does need service. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, and Elena held her breath. Finally, he sighed and opened the office door. Pops, he called out. Schedule Elena for a full service on Wednesday. Her sedan needs work. Elena felt a rush of gratitude so intense it made her dizzy. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Marcus said quietly. And don't think this changes anything. You're a customer, nothing more. But as Elena walked back through the shop, she caught Marcus watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. And when Leo waved goodbye from where he was playing with Lego cars in the corner, calling out, See you Wednesday, car lady, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in 6 years. Hope. Wednesday afternoon arrived with surprising sunshine. Elena sat in the cramped waiting area of Thorn Auto, surrounded by mismatched plastic chairs and the smell of coffee that had been sitting too long. She wore simple jeans and a sweater, clothes that felt foreign after years of power suits and designer heels. The older man Marcus had called Pops brought her a steaming mug and settled into the chair beside her. Up close, she could see the kindness in his weathered face, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. Coffee's not much, he said with a chuckle, but it's hot. Thank you. Elena wrapped her hands around the mug, grateful for something to do with her nervous energy. You know, Pop said conversationally, I've been working on cars for 40 years, seen all kinds of people come through that door. But you got a familiar look about you. Elena's heart stuttered. Did he know? Had Marcus told him who she really was? Before she could respond, the shop's front door chimed, and a woman walked in carrying a tray of what smelled like fresh-baked muffins. She was pretty, with warm brown skin and natural hair pulled back in a colorful headband. Her smile was bright and genuine as she called out,
Morning, Pops. Where's Marcus hiding?
Back with the Mustang, Pops replied. Sarah, this here's Elena. She's having her car serviced. Sarah turned to Elena with friendly curiosity. Nice to meet you. I'm Sarah Jenkins. I own the bakery next door. She held up the tray. Brought Marcus his favorites, blueberry with that streusel topping he pretends not to love. Elena watched Sarah's face light up when she mentioned Marcus, saw the way she smoothed her hair before calling out, "Marcus, I brought you something!" A familiar stab of jealousy hit Elena's chest, sharp and unexpected. She had no right to feel possessive about Marcus. She'd given up that right 6 years ago. But watching Sarah beam as Marcus emerged from the back of the shop, wiping his hands on a rag, made Elena's stomach clench with an emotion she had no business feeling.
"Sarah, you're gonna make me fat,"
Marcus said, but his smile was warm as he accepted a muffin.
"Leo, come try one of Miss Sarah's muffins before."
They disappear. Leo came running from the corner where he'd been building an elaborate Lego city, his face bright with excitement. Are they the ones with the crumbly stuff on top? The very same, Sarah laughed, ruffling his hair with easy affection. Elena watched the interaction with a tight chest. Sarah fit here in a way Elena never had, never could. She belonged in this world of warm laughter and casual touches, of community and belonging. Elena was an outsider looking in, just as she'd always been. But then Leo noticed her sitting quietly in the corner. "Car lady, you came back." "I did." Elena's voice came out softer than she'd intended. "I told you I would." Leo abandoned his muffin and bounded over to her, his eyes bright with curiosity. "Daddy's working on your car, but it's super boring. Just an oil change and some other stuff. You should get something cooler." "Leo," Marcus warned gently, "let the lady drink her coffee in peace." "It's all right," Elena said quickly. "I don't mind." Leo studied her with the intense focus only children possessed. "You know what? Your eyes are weird." "Leo!" Marcus's voice was sharper now, embarrassed. "No, it's okay," Elena laughed, the sound surprising even her. "Weird how?" "They're the same color as mine," Leo said matter-of-factly. "Daddy says I got special eyes. Maybe you got special eyes too." Elena's breath caught. She looked up to find Marcus watching them with an unreadable expression, his jaw tight with some emotion she couldn't name. "Maybe I do," she managed. Leo nodded seriously, then noticed the Lego car that had rolled under Elena's chair. When he bent to retrieve it, their fingers brushed as she handed it to him. The simple touch sent warmth shooting up Elena's arm, the first time she'd touched her son in 6 years. "Thanks," Leo said, then studied her face again with that unnerving child's directness. "Are you sad? You look sad." Elena's throat tightened. How could she explain to this innocent boy that she was drowning in regret? That seeing him happy and loved was both the best and worst thing that had ever happened to her? "Sometimes grown-ups have sad thoughts," she said carefully. "But being here makes me feel better." Leo nodded as if this made perfect sense, then dropped to the floor beside her chair. "Want to help me fix my city? It got knocked over, and now all the cars are in the wrong places." Elena looked around uncertainly. Sitting on the floor of an auto shop in her good jeans seemed like something the old Elena would never do. But the old Elena had made a lot of mistakes. She slid down to the linoleum floor, ignoring Sarah's surprised look. "Show me what needs fixing." For the next 20 minutes, Elena found herself absorbed in the serious business of Lego city planning. Leo was a demanding architect with specific ideas about where the fire station should go and why the police station needed to be near the hospital. His chatter filled the space between them, easy and natural. And Elena felt something inside her chest that had been frozen for years begin to thaw. She was so focused on helping Leo position a tiny Lego ambulance that she didn't notice the commotion at the front of the shop until a man's angry voice cut through the peaceful afternoon.
"This is ridiculous! $300 for what should be a $50 job!"
Elena looked up to see a red-faced customer waving a bill at Marcus, his voice getting louder with each word.
"You people think you can charge whatever you want just because I drive a nice car."
"Sir," Marcus said calmly, "the price breakdown is right there on the estimate you approved. The parts alone."
"Don't give me that!"
The man interrupted.
"I know you jacked up the price because you figured I'd pay it."
Elena felt her body tense with a familiar surge of protective anger. She'd seen this before, People who assume they could intimidate small business owners, who use their privilege like a weapon. The man's tone, his dismissive gesture, the way he said, "You people," it all triggered something deep and fierce in Elena's chest. She stood up slowly, brushing Lego dust off her knees. When she spoke, her voice carried the crisp authority of someone who'd spent years in boardrooms full of men exactly like this one. "Excuse me." The words cut through the man's bluster like a knife. "I couldn't help overhearing your concern about the pricing." The customer turned to her, clearly caught off guard by her tone. "This is between me and him, lady." "Actually, it's not." Elena moved closer, her posture shifting into the confident stance that had intimidated investors and competitors for years. "See, I happen to be familiar with automotive pricing standards, and I'd be happy to review your bill." She held out her hand expectantly, and the customer, confused by her authority, handed over the paperwork. Elena scanned it quickly, her business-trained eye taking in the details. "Let's see. Transmission, fluid change, brake inspection, oil change, and… here's the issue. You needed a new alternator." So, Mr. Elena glanced at the name on the bill. "Henderson, an OEM alternator for a 2018 BMW runs about $200 wholesale. Add installation, labor, and shop overhead, and $300 is actually quite reasonable. In fact, it's about $50 less than what you'd pay at the dealership." Henderson's face was getting redder. "How do you know that?" Elena smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. "Because I make it my business to know these things. I also know that according to state consumer protection laws, any customer has the right to see documentation of parts costs and labor rates before agreeing to service." "Did Mr. Thorne provide you with that information?" Marcus nodded slowly. "I gave him a written estimate before starting any work." "And did you approve this estimate, Mr. Henderson?" Henderson's bluster was deflating rapidly. "Well, yes, but then you have no legal grounds for complaint." Elena handed the bill back to him. "I suggest you pay what you owe and find another shop if you're not satisfied with the service here." Henderson looked between Elena and Marcus, clearly realizing he'd lost this battle. He pulled out his wallet with exaggerated irritation, threw some bills on the counter, and stalked out without another word. The shop was quiet for a moment after the door slammed shut. Then Pops let out a low whistle. "Damn, girl, where'd you learn to talk like that?" Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks as she realized everyone was staring at her. Sarah looked impressed but puzzled. Leo was wide-eyed with admiration, and Marcus was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between surprise and grudging respect. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "Yes, I did." Elena's voice was firm. "Men like that think they can push people around because they drive expensive cars. It's not right." "And you know about car pricing because…" Elena hesitated. She could lie, make up some story about researching it online. But something in Marcus's eyes made her want to tell the truth. "Because I've had to learn about a lot of different businesses over the years," she said carefully. "It's part of my job." "What kind of job?" Sarah asked with friendly curiosity. Before Elena could answer, Leo piped up from where he was still sitting with his Legos. "That was so cool! You made that mean man go away. Daddy, did you see how she did that?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Yeah, Leo, I saw." His tone was neutral, but Elena caught something in his expression, a flicker of the man who'd once looked at her like she hung the moon. It was gone in an instant, but it had been there. "Your car's ready," Marcus said, turning back to the counter. "Just the oil change and inspection like we discussed." Elena paid the modest bill, acutely aware of the difference between this honest charge and what she spent on a single business lunch. As she gathered her purse and keys, Leo tugged on her sleeve. "Are you going to come back?" he asked with the directness of a 6-year-old who decided he liked her. Elena looked at Marcus, whose expression was carefully neutral. "If it's okay with your dad." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Elena held her breath. Finally, he nodded once. "Your car could probably use regular maintenance, every couple weeks or so." It wasn't much, but it was something. Elena felt that unfamiliar flutter of hope in her chest again. "Thank you," she said softly. As she walked to her car, she heard Leo call out, "Bye, Elena! See you next time!" Elena, not car lady or the customer. He'd remembered her name. She sat in her car for a moment before starting the engine, watching through the shop windows as Marcus returned to his work, as Sarah lingered to chat with Pops, as Leo rebuilt his Lego city with intense concentration. For the first time in 6 years, Elena had somewhere to look forward to going. But that evening, as she sat in her silent penthouse apartment, reality crashed back down around her. Her phone had been ringing all afternoon. Messages from her father, from Julian, from board members wondering where she'd disappeared to. She was living a double life now, stealing hours away from her real world to play pretend in Marcus's shop. How long could she keep it up before someone noticed, before her two worlds collided? Elena stared out at the city lights below, thinking about Leo's bright laughter, about the way Marcus's eyes had softened just slightly when she'd stood up for him. For the first time in years, she was truly happy during those stolen hours. But happiness, Elena had learned long ago, was a luxury she wasn't allowed to keep. 3 weeks later, Elena had fallen into a routine that felt both dangerous and necessary. She would finish her morning meetings, claim a sudden migraine or urgent client call, and drive across the city to Thorn Auto. She kept a change of clothes in her car. Jeans and sweaters that felt like a costume for the person she was pretending to be. At the shop, she helped Leo with his homework while Marcus worked. She organized Pop's chaotic filing system. She brought coffee that didn't taste like motor oil and listened to Leo's endless stories about school and cars and his dreams of becoming a race car driver. She was careful, never to overstep, never to assume more than she'd been given, but with each visit, she felt the ice between her and Marcus melting, degree by careful degree. Until everything changed, on a Tuesday that started like any other. Elena was sitting cross-legged on the shop floor, helping Leo build what he claimed was going to be the world's most awesome Lego garage when Pops came over with the mail.
Bills, bills, and more bills,
he muttered, sorting through the stack.
And what's this fancy envelope here?
Marcus looked up from the engine he was rebuilding. Probably another one of those credit card offers, but when Pops opened it, his expression darkened.
"Marcus, you need to see this."
Elena watched Marcus wipe his hands and take the official-looking document. She saw the exact moment his face changed, saw the color drain from his cheeks as he read. "What is it, Daddy?" Leo asked, looking up from his Legos. Marcus didn't answer. His eyes found Elena across the shop, and the look in them made her stomach drop to her feet. "Leo, go help Pops organize the tool room," Marcus said quietly, never taking his eyes off Elena. "But I'm not done with my garage." "Now, Leo." Something in his tone made Leo scramble to his feet without arguing. Elena stood slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Marcus walked to her, holding the paper like evidence of a crime. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "Eviction notice, 30 days. He held up the letterhead so she could see it clearly. From Vance International. Elena's world tilted. She reached for the paper with trembling fingers, scanning the legal language that condemned everything Marcus had built. "I don't understand. My father said—" "Your father?" Marcus's voice cracked like a whip. "Your father?" The pieces clicked together in Elena's mind with horrible clarity. Victor had found out about her visits somehow. This was his way of forcing her hand, of making sure she chose her old life over the fragile new one she'd been building. "Marcus, I can fix this," she said desperately. "I didn't know he was planning—" "You didn't know?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're Elena Vance, of Vance International, and you didn't know your own company was trying to destroy my business?" "I'm not involved in a real estate division," Elena said, which was true but sounded pathetic even to her own ears. "I can talk to him, make him stop." "Like you made him stop 6 years ago?" Marcus's words hit her like physical blows. "When you chose his money over our son." Elena flinched. "That's not fair." "Fair?" Marcus crumpled the eviction notice in his fist. You want to talk about fair? I built this place from nothing, Elena. This shop, this life, everything Leo knows. It's all here. And your family wants to tear it down for what? Another parking lot? Another one of your fancy buildings? Elena looked around the shop that had become her refuge, imagining it gone. No more afternoons with Leo, no more careful conversations with Marcus, no more feeling like she belonged somewhere. I'll stop it, she said firmly. I promise you, I'll stop it. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, and Elena held her breath. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and decisive. You have until the end of the week. That evening, Elena stormed into her father's office without knocking. Victor was on a conference call, but she didn't care. She stood in front of his massive desk, shaking with fury, until he ended the call with an irritated sigh.
Elena.
You look upset. Cancel the South Side development. Her voice was steadier than she felt. All of it. Victor leaned back in his leather chair, his pale eyes cold and calculating. I'm afraid I don't know what you mean. The eviction notices, the property acquisitions, whatever you're planning for that area, stop it. Ah. Victor stepped his fingers under his chin. You mean the warehouse project? I'm afraid that's not possible. We've already invested significant capital. I don't care. Elena planted her hands on his desk, leaning forward. Find another location. Victor studied her face with the detached interest of a scientist examining a specimen. This wouldn't have anything to do with your mysterious afternoon disappearances, would it? Elena's blood turned to ice. He knew. Of course he knew. I don't know what you mean. Victor opened his desk drawer and pulled out a manila folder. He spread the contents across the desk like playing cards, and Elena's world collapsed. Photos. Dozens of them. Elena walking into Thorn Auto. Elena sitting on the floor with Leo. Elena standing close to Marcus as they looked under the hood of a car. Elena laughing at something Leo had said, looking younger and happier than she had in years. Julian became concerned about your behavior, Victor said conversationally. He hired a private investigator to look into your activities. Imagine my surprise when I learned my daughter has been playing house with the same people I specifically told her to stay away from 6 years ago. Elena sank into the chair across from his desk, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. Father, do you have any idea how this looks? Victor's voice was quiet, which was somehow worse than if he'd been shouting. The CEO of Vance International slumming with mechanics, playing mother to a child she abandoned. If this gets out, it will destroy everything we've built. They're not slumming, Elena said fiercely. They're good people. Better than us? Victor's eyebrows rose. Better than the family that gave you everything? The company that made you rich beyond most people's dreams? Elena looked around the opulent office, the artwork worth more than most people's houses, the imported marble, the windows that looked out over a city her family helped shape. All of it felt cold and meaningless compared to Leo's laughter or the pride in Marcus's eyes when he'd completed a difficult repair. Yes, she said quietly. Better than us. Victor's face hardened. Then you've learned nothing in 6 years. He pulled another document from the folder and slid it across the desk. Elena recognized it immediately, a contract, thick with legal language and official seals. What is this? Your engagement contract with Julian, the merger documents. Everything is finalized except your signature. Elena's hands shook as she picked up the papers. I never agreed to this. You will. Victor's voice was as final as a judge pronouncing sentence. You'll sign those papers. You'll announce your engagement at the charity gala this Friday, and you'll never see those people again. And if I refuse? Victor smiled, and it was the coldest expression Elena had ever seen on a human face. Then I'll make sure Marcus Thorn loses everything, not just the shop, his house, his truck, his bank accounts. I'll have him arrested on trumped-up charges if necessary. I'll make sure he can't get work anywhere in this city. Elena's vision went gray around the edges. You can't. I can, and I will. Victor stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the city. Do you think I got where I am by being merciful to people who threaten my family's legacy? Marcus Thorne is a mechanic, Elena. Replaceable, disposable. You are my daughter and the heir to this company. Which do you think matters more? The threat hung in the air between them like poison. Elena stared at the contract in her hands, at the signature line that would end any chance she had of being part of Leo's life. But if she didn't sign it, Marcus would lose everything. Leo would lose the only stable home he'd ever known. Just like 6 years ago, Elena was trapped between the family she loved and the family that owned her. You have until Friday, Victor said without turning around. Make the right choice this time. Elena left his office on unsteady legs, the contract clutched in her shaking hands. She made it to her car before the tears came, great gulping sobs that shook her whole body. She couldn't sign the contract, but she couldn't let Victor destroy Marcus either, which meant there was only one choice left. She had to break Marcus's heart to save his life. Thursday evening, Elena sat in her car outside Thorne Auto as rain began to fall. Inside, she could see the warm light of the shop, could hear the faint sound of music playing. Home. It had started to feel like home, but she couldn't go in, not yet. Instead, she pulled out her phone and called the one person who might understand. Elena? Pop's voice was warm with surprise. Everything all right, child? I need to ask you something, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. That day I came to the shop, you said I looked familiar. There was a pause. I said that, yes. Did you know? Did you know who I was? Another pause, longer this time. I had my suspicions. You got Leo's eyes. And Marcus, well, Marcus was a different man 6 years ago. Angry, hurt. Man don't get that hurt over just anybody. Elena closed her eyes. Why didn't you say anything? Wasn't my place. Pop's voice was gentle. But I will say this. I seen that boy light up when you're around. I seen Marcus try to pretend he don't care, but his eyes follow you around that shop like your sunshine after a long winter. It doesn't matter, Elena whispered. It can't matter. Child, what's wrong? You sound like you're saying goodbye. Elena ended the call without answering and walked through the rain to the shop. Marcus was alone, working late on the Mustang. He looked up when she entered, and his smile faded when he saw her face. Elena? What's wrong? She had practiced this speech in her car, had chosen the words that would hurt him enough to make him stop fighting for her. But standing there, looking at his concerned face, the words died in her throat. I can't do this anymore, she said finally. Marcus straightened slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. Can't do what? This. Elena gestured around the shop, her voice gaining strength from desperation. Playing house, pretending I'm someone I'm not. Something shifted in Marcus's expression. What are you talking about? I'm bored, Marcus. The lie tasted like poison on her tongue. This was interesting for a while, but I have a real life to get back to. A real life. Marcus's voice was flat. A merger to finalize, an engagement to announce. Elena forced herself to meet his eyes, to sell the lie, with every ounce of acting ability she possessed. I was slumming, I guess, but it's time to be realistic. Marcus flinched as if she'd hit him. And Leo? What about him? You're just going to disappear from his life? Again? Elena's heart was breaking with every word, but she forced herself to shrug. He's not really my son, is he? You made sure of that. The hurt that flashed across Marcus's face almost made her break character, but she held firm, even as she died inside. Get out. Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. Marcus, get out. He threw the rag he'd been holding, and it hit the wall beside her head. Get the hell out of my shop. Elena turned and ran before her resolve could crumble. She made it to her car before the sobs overtook her, great heaving cries that shook her whole body. In the rearview mirror, she saw Marcus kick a tire in frustration, saw him lean against his workbench with his head in his hands. She'd done it. She'd broken his heart to save his life, just like she had 6 years ago. But this time, she wasn't sure either of them would survive it. Friday morning dawned gray and cold. Elena stood at the window of her penthouse, watching the city wake up beneath a layer of storm clouds that matched her mood. In a few hours, she would put on an expensive gown, smile for the cameras, and announce her engagement to a man she didn't love to save the man she did. The charity gala was being held at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, the kind of event where wealthy people paid thousands of dollars to feel good about themselves while changing nothing meaningful about the world. Elena had attended dozens of them over the years, always playing her part perfectly. But today felt different. Today felt like a funeral. Her phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "Looking forward to tonight, darling. The ring is magnificent." Elena stared at the message until the words blurred. Ring. He'd bought her a ring without asking what she liked, just as he'd planned. Their entire future without caring what she wanted. She threw the phone onto her bed and walked to her closet. The gown Victor had chosen hung there like a golden cage, beautiful, expensive, and designed to transform her into the perfect accessory for his empire. Meanwhile, across the city, the atmosphere at Thorn Auto was heavy with loss. Marcus worked with mechanical precision, his jaw tight, his movements sharp with barely contained anger. Leo sat in the corner with his Legos, building and rebuilding the same structure over and over. "Where's Elena?" Leo had asked that morning. "Is she coming today?" "No, son," Marcus had replied, his voice carefully steady. "She's not coming back." "Why not?" Marcus had looked at his son's confused face and felt the familiar weight of trying to explain adult cruelty to innocent eyes. "Sometimes people leave, even when you want them to stay." Leo had nodded with the solemn acceptance of a child who'd already learned this lesson too young, and Marcus's heart had broken a little more. Pops watched his nephew work with growing concern. He'd seen Marcus hurt before, but this was different. This was the kind of pain that changed a man permanently. "You gonna tell me what happened?" Pops asked during the lunch break. Marcus didn't look up from the engine he was rebuilding. "She got bored, remembered she belonged in a different world. That's a load of garbage and we both know it." Marcus's hands stilled on the wrench. "Do we? Boy, I seen the way that woman looked at you, at Leo. That wasn't boredom. That was love." "Then why?" Marcus's voice cracked and he cleared his throat angrily. "Why did she leave?" Before Pops could answer, the shop's phone rang. Marcus ignored it, but Pops answered with his usual cheerful greeting. "Thorn Auto, this is Pops." "What?" "Slow down, child, I can barely understand you." Marcus looked up as Pop's face went pale. "We'll be right there," Pop said, hanging up the phone. "That was the school." Leo collapsed during recess. "They're taking him to Children's Hospital." The wrench clattered to the floor as Marcus bolted for his truck. 20 minutes later, Marcus paced the pediatric emergency waiting room like a caged animal. The nurse had said Leo was stable, that it was probably just dehydration and exhaustion, but Marcus couldn't stop imagining worst-case scenarios. "Mr. Thorne?" A young doctor approached with a clipboard. "Leo's going to be fine. He was dehydrated and his blood sugar was low. Have you noticed him eating less lately? Any changes in his routine?" Marcus thought about the past few days, about Leo's subdued mood, his half-finished meals. He's been sad. Someone he cared about left. The doctor nodded with understanding. Children often express emotional stress through physical symptoms. We're giving him fluids and he should be ready to go home in a few hours. "Can I see him?" "Of course, room 412. Marcus found Leo looking small and pale in the dotted hospital bed, an IV in his tiny hand. Leo's face lit up when he saw his father.
"Daddy, I felt really dizzy and then everything went dark."
"You're okay now," Marcus said, settling into the chair beside the bed. "You just need to drink more water and eat your vegetables." Leo wrinkled his nose.
Even the yucky green ones?
Especially the yucky green ones. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Leo dozing fitfully while Marcus held his hand. Then Leo's voice, small and confused, broke the quiet.
Daddy, did I do something wrong?
What do you mean, son?
Elena, did I make her not want to come back?
Marcus felt his throat close up. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that sometimes adults make choices that hurt everyone, including themselves? No, Leo, you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated problems that kids can't fix. Leo considered this seriously. I miss her. I know, son, I miss her too. Down the hall, the elevator opened and Elena stepped out, her face pale with panic. She'd been in a final dress fitting when her phone had buzzed with a news alert. Local boy hospitalized, name withheld pending family notification. But she'd seen the school's name, seen the mention of the South Side, and her heart had told her what her mind didn't want to accept. She'd left the boutique, still wearing the sample gown, had driven through the city like a woman possessed, had used her family's name to get information from the hospital staff. Now she stood outside room 412, looking through the doorway at Marcus holding Leo's hand, and the sight nearly brought her to her knees. Elena? The voice belonged to the nurse she'd spoken to at the desk. I'm sorry, but visiting hours are family only. Elena's voice failed her. What was she? Not Leo's mother, legally, not Marcus's anything anymore, just a woman who loved them both and had no right to either. But then Leo saw her through the doorway. Elena! His voice was bright with joy and relief.
You came!
Before anyone could stop her, Elena was in the room, at Leo's bedside, her hand shaking as she touched his forehead. Are you okay? What happened? I heard on the news. Miss, the nurse appeared in the doorway. I told you, family only. She is family, Leo said firmly, his small hand grasping Elena's. She's my mom. The words hung in the air like a blessing and a curse. Elena felt tears spilling down her cheeks as she looked at Marcus, expecting anger, expecting him to correct Leo's mistake. Instead, Marcus's eyes were soft with something like understanding. Yes, he said quietly to the nurse. She is. The nurse nodded and left them alone. Elena sank into the second chair, her expensive gown pooling around her feet, her carefully styled hair beginning to fall loose. What are you doing here? Marcus asked, but his voice held no anger. I heard about Leo on the news. I had to. I couldn't stay away. But your engagement party is in 2 hours, Elena said, looking down at the elaborate dress. I'm supposed to announce my wedding to a man I don't love, merge my company with his, and smile for the cameras while my heart breaks. Leo looked between his parents with the solemn attention of a child who understands more than adults give him credit for. Are you going to marry someone else? He asked Elena with devastating directness. Elena looked into her son's eyes, so much like her own, so trusting and innocent, and felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. I don't know, she whispered. Do you love him? No. Do you love us? The question was so simple, so pure, that it cut through 6 years of fear and doubt and manipulation like a sword through silk. Yes, Elena said, her voice stronger now. More than anything in the world. Leo nodded as if this settled everything. Then don't marry him. Stay with us. It's not that simple, son, Marcus said gently. Why not? Leo's voice carried the frustrated logic of childhood. If she loves us and we love her, why can't we all be together? Elena and Marcus looked at each other over Leo's head. And in that moment, Elena saw something she hadn't seen in 6 years. Hope. Because, Elena said slowly, sometimes the right thing to do is very scary. And sometimes you have to be brave enough to disappoint people who expect you to be someone you're not. As if summoned by her words, Elena's phone rang. Victor's name flashed on the screen like a threat. I have to take this, she said, stepping into the hallway. Where are you? Victor's voice was ice cold. The photographers are already here. Julian is asking questions, and you're nowhere to be found. Leo's in the hospital, Elena said. I don't care if he's on the moon. You have obligations. He's my son. The words exploded out of Elena with 6 years of suppressed fury. My son is sick, and I'm exactly where I need to be. That boy is not your son, Victor said with vicious precision. You signed those rights away. You are Elena Vance, and you will be here in 1 hour, or I will destroy everyone you claim to care about. No. Elena's voice was steady, clear, final. You won't. Elena, because I'm going to destroy you first. She hung up and walked back into Leo's room, where Marcus was reading him a story from a picture book someone had brought from the gift shop. Everything okay? Marcus asked, though her expression probably answered the question. No, Elena said, sitting back down beside Leo's bed. But it will be. She took Leo's free hand in hers and looked at Marcus. I need to tell you both something important about why I really left 6 years ago and why I tried to leave again yesterday. For the next 20 minutes, Elena told them everything about Victor's threats, about the eviction notices, about the impossible choices she'd faced both times. She told them about the photos and the ultimatum, about Julian and the engagement contract. When she finished, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, So yesterday, when you said all those things, I was trying to protect you, both of you, just like before. By breaking our hearts? By saving your lives. Leo had listened to the whole story with wide eyes. Now he squeezed Elena's hand with surprising strength. Are you going to let the mean man win again? Elena looked down at her son, because he was her son, no matter what any legal document said, and felt something she'd lost 6 years ago finally click back into place. No, she said firmly. I'm not. She pulled out her phone and opened the voice recording app. What are you doing? Marcus asked. Calling my father's bluff. The phone rang twice before Victor answered. Elena, thank God. Where? I'm not coming to the gala, Elena said clearly, making sure the recording captured every word. And I'm not marrying Julian. Yes, you are, because if you don't, I will make sure Marcus Thorne will what, father? Lose his shop? Have trumped-up charges filed against him? Maybe you'd like to explain those threats to the state attorney general. Or perhaps the local news would be interested in a recording of the chairman of Vance International threatening to destroy a small business owner's life because his daughter fell in love with someone he doesn't approve of. The silence on the other end was deafening. You wouldn't, Victor said finally, but his voice had lost its certainty. Try me. Elena ended the call and turned off the recording. Marcus was staring at her with something like awe. Will that work? It'll work, Elena said with grim satisfaction. My father built his empire on intimidation and backroom deals. He can't survive in a light. So what happens now? Elena looked around the hospital room, at the simple white walls and the soft beeping of machines, at Leo's trusting face and Marcus's careful hope. Then she looked down at her elaborate gown, at the costume she'd worn for a life that was never really hers. Now, she said, I go home and change clothes, and then I come back here and we figure out what our real life looks like. Our real life? Marcus's voice was careful, as if he was afraid to hope. Elena stood up and smoothed Leo's hair back from his forehead. If you'll have me. If it's not too late to try again. Leo grinned. It's not too late. Right, Daddy? Marcus looked at Elena for a long moment. This woman who'd hurt him and lost him and found her way back to him. Who'd just thrown away everything she'd been raised to value for the chance to love them properly this time. No, he said softly. It's not too late. Elena kissed Leo's forehead and squeezed Marcus's hand. I'll be back in an hour. In jeans and a sweater and sneakers that are good for sitting on hospital floors. Where are you going? Leo asked. Elena smiled, and it was the first genuinely happy expression Marcus had seen on her face in 6 years. To burn down my old life so I can build a new one. As she walked out of the hospital, Elena could hear the sounds of the city around her, traffic and sirens and life moving forward in all its messy, beautiful chaos. Somewhere across town, a gala was starting without her. Photographers were waiting for pictures that would never be taken, and a man was standing at an altar that would remain empty. But here in this moment, walking toward a future she was finally brave enough to choose, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced since she was 26 and holding her newborn son for the first and last time. She felt free. 6 months later, the autumn sun streamed through the windows of what was now Thorne and Vance Auto Restoration. Elena looked up from the computer where she'd been reconciling the books, a task she'd volunteered for and actually enjoyed, to see Marcus and Leo working together on a 1967 Chevelle. "Hand me that wrench, partner," Marcus was saying, and Leo carefully selected the right tool from the set Elena had bought him for his 7th birthday.
This one, Daddy?
"Perfect. You're getting good at this." Elena smiled as she watched them work. Leo had Marcus's patience and her attention to detail, and he approached every project with the serious concentration of someone who knew he was learning something important. The shop was thriving. Elena's business knowledge, combined with Marcus's skill and reputation, had attracted clients from all over the city. They'd expanded into classic car restoration and even had a waiting list for custom work. More importantly, they'd found their rhythm as a family. Leo called Elena Mom now without hesitation, and Elena had legally adopted him 2 months ago in a ceremony that left everyone in tears of joy. She and Marcus had moved slowly, carefully, rebuilding trust that had been broken twice. But last week, when Leo had asked when Mommy and Daddy were going to get married, like normal parents, Elena had seen Marcus's smile and felt her heart skip in the old, familiar way. "Elena?" Pops appeared in the doorway of what was now their shared office. "There's someone here to see you." Elena looked up to see a young woman with a notebook and a press badge. "Ms. Vance, I'm Jenny Rodriguez from the City Business Journal. I was hoping to interview you about your transition from corporate executive to small business owner." Elena glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Over the past months, her story had attracted attention, the heiress who'd walked away from a fortune to follow her heart. Most of the coverage had been positive, though the society pages had been less kind. "Of course," Elena said, gesturing to the small seating area they'd set up for customers. "Though I should mention, it's Elena Thorne now." The reporter's eyebrows rose. "You're married?" Elena looked over at Marcus, who was helping Leo position a part with careful hands, his face patient and proud and beautiful in the afternoon light. "Soon," she said, and meant it, with every fiber of her being. As the interview wound down, Elena found herself thinking about the question that had started it all. What legacy was she building? 6 months ago, the answer would have been board positions and profit margins and buildings with her family's name carved in stone. Now, watching her son learn the value of hard work from his father, seeing the pride in Marcus's eyes when a difficult restoration came together perfectly, knowing that they'd built something real and honest together. Now Elena knew what legacy meant. It wasn't about monuments or money or what the world thought of you. It was about love that lasted, trust that endured, and the courage to choose happiness over fear. It was about coming home. As the reporter left and the afternoon light began to fade, Elena walked over to where Marcus and Leo were cleaning up their tools. Without a word, Marcus put his arm around her shoulders, and Leo wrapped himself around her legs. And Elena felt the kind of contentment that money could never buy. She was exactly where she belonged. The end.